When I was 13, my parents took me to my ancestral village for the first time, deep in the mountainous valleys of my homeland. Far away from the urban lifestyle that was hectic and taxing, my parents thought that some quiet time in the rural area would cleanse our minds of the stressful city life. My village is separated from the outside world, living it in a glorious little bubble, having its own ridiculous yet fun myths and legends that us kids, no matter how far from our roots, have memorized. To be honest, I never was the most superstitious sort. My mind always worked on logic and science, taking as evidence only the observable things. However, to this day I am unable to understand what went on in my ancestral village, whether I had encountered mere illusions, or whether I had discovered energies that lay beyond the human realm, tearing at the boundaries between the both. It all started in my third week of stay at my grandmother's house, which is huge and very old. Like all traditional houses in my village, the washrooms were outside the house, behind it in the open. Thus, in order to access them, you'd need to leave the house. One night, as my cousins and I slept in the master room, I felt the urge to relieve myself. Waking up groggily, I looked around me to find the room motionless, disturbed only by the sounds of occasional snoring. Everyone was deep in slumber. I tiptoed around them, making my way out of the room and into the courtyard, from where I exited the house, heading towards the back. It wasn't very dark. Heavy gray clouds hung above in the sky, threatening to pour down at any second. The moon occasionally peeped from between them too, illuminating the bright wheat fields that sprawled until the edge of the forest. The bathroom was a little hut-like building, made for single use at a time. I entered inside, locking the door behind my back, yawning sleepily. Everything was silent and motionless, except for the deep muted rumbling of the clouds above. Slowly, the pitter-patter of the rain became audible too as I sighed defeatedly, acknowledging that I'd have to get back into the house fully soaked. Suddenly, a loud rapping knock at the door jolted me right out of my sleep. It was very harsh and hasty, more like a banging than a knock. Whoever it was must really be in an emergency. "I'm coming," I shouted from within a few seconds later. The banging did not stop. I shouted again louder this time, thinking that they must have missed my voice over the growing noise of the rain. Yet the banging continued, relentless and persistent. I stared at the door for a couple of seconds in sheer confusion as the entire washroom shook from the sheer force of the rapping. Who could it be at this time? Frustrated and slightly ticked off, I gathered myself and rushed to open the door, ready to tell off whoever it was. As soon as I swung the door open, the wild knocking ceased, allowing me to look dumbfoundedly into the empty field in front of me in which not a single person was in sight. I looked around, unable to see too clearly for the rain poured heavily now, descending upon the earth in sheets. I stepped out giddily, the monsoon rain soaking into my clothes instantly. I had walked just a few steps when my eye caught a subtle movement in the field. Despite the rain, I felt that I had seen a black blur descending down into the visual safety of the tall wheatgrass, watching me yet trying to stay out of view. "Who's there?" I shouted, the rainwater entering my mouth uncomfortably. For a dreadful second, all was silent. I had pinned my eyes onto the dark blur, hidden and stationary behind the grasses. I wouldn't be leaving without an answer. The thing must have realized that too, because just a short while later, a dark figure rose through the grasses, standing up tall and straight. For the first time in my life, a questionable fear started to grow in me like a rotten patch of feelings. All of my scientific logic and reasoning went down the drain immediately as I set my eyes on the figure, debating myself on whether this was a human being or not. The features were very feminine, mind you, yet everything was wrong, lopsided and artificial looking, as if someone had tried to create a human from memory. Sharp gray eyes lined thickly with jet-black kohl stared deeply at me, letting me absorb the gaze into my soul. Her thin facial bones stood out terrifyingly, and I stood there, frozen and in panic. Her clothes were what seemed the oddest, though. She was clad head to toe in a traditional bridal outfit, heavily laden with rich jewels and sequins. However, unlike the normally red bridal dresses I'd usually seen, this woman's dress was pitch black, so dark that one could not make out anything except the face. "Excuse me, who are you?" I asked, my voice shaking in mild terror. The lady stayed silent, just staring at me with wide eyes and an expressionless face. Maybe it was a hallucination at that point, but I had the strangest feeling that my eyes had seen her smile just a little bit, just the slightest bit of lip rising at the corner of her mouth. Slowly and dramatically, she opened her mouth, emitting a shrill, siren-like sound that raised the hair on the back of my neck. It was like a distress call, very much inhumane, so to say the least. Her black lipstick bordered a dark mouth in which no teeth were visible. Something was awfully wrong about her and the entire situation. So after 2 perplexingly terrifying minutes, there was nothing left for me to do except to sprint away as quickly as possible. As I turned around and ran towards the house, I heard a hissing sound behind me, angry and aggressive, quite serpentine in nature. Horrified, I ran faster, unsure of what this person wanted from me. Unfortunately, I wasn't that lucky. All that time with my grandmother had plumped me up quite a bit, causing a significant drop in my top running speed. I felt hot air at my heels as I ran through the soggy field. The rain didn't help much too, only slowing me down as I felt my feet sink into the soft mud. A hand wrapped around my ankle, clutching it tightly and causing me to trip over face first into a stalk of wheatgrass. I felt a sharp pain in my face as I realized that my cheek had been lacerated nastily. The warm rain stung on it as I turned around and let the water droplets run down my chin with the blood. The woman sat near me, squatting down and laughing maniacally. Every laugh of hers sent a jolt of fear through my body as I lay helplessly at her mercy, flat in the dirt. She bared her toothless mouth as I saw her closely. She was even more terrifying now that I could see her rotten black mouth, in which not even a single tooth resided. As I struggled to get up, she held me down, drooling and groaning with a smile. Dark saliva ran down the corners of her mouth as I stared at her dumbfounded. Slowly, she held her hand to her mouth, closing her eyes and muttering to herself. It sounded like some sort of an incantation, something vile and voodoo-ish, certainly not in good taste. She finished whispering and immediately resumed her maniacal laughing session, bringing her enchanted hand towards my neck, where the wheat stalk had cut into the skin. Her hands felt like acid on the cut, burning it with a slight sizzle that was clearly audible. I yelped in pain, then screamed desperately as a last resort for escaping this crazy being. "Help!" I screamed towards the house. She hissed at my volume, clearly not pleased with the fact that I was a loud child. It was not long before I heard a muffled shout emanate through the rainy air, coming from the direction of this mansion. "Help me!" I screamed louder, desperate to get out of this situation. My uncle approached the field with a hunting rifle in his arm, determined to shoot whatever had come in the path of his niece. But there was nothing there, nothing that could be seen. The woman had simply vanished into thin air, just like that. My uncle shone his flashlight in the field around me, trying to see what had frightened me. He found nothing. I looked at my grandmother's face the next morning as I narrated the entire story to her. Her brows furrowed in recognition as I told her about the woman and her clothes, how she disappeared at the slightest show of violence. I searched her face for answers, begging for them quite literally, just to fill the spaces of what had actually happened the night before. "So it's real," she said, rubbing her wrinkled hands together. Her face looked worried and slightly panicked. "What is, Grandma?" "Look, my baby," she said, removing her glasses. "I don't want to worry you, but it is not a good sign." I sat fairly at ease, sipping the chocolate drink in the comfort of her presence, uncaring about what warning she was going to give. "There is a legend that has been born in this village, the legend of Alazuna. She's been manifesting her physical appearance for decades in this village, ever since it came into being. But no one has ever seen her as clearly as you have, not until last night. Her story is tragic, yet one finds it difficult to sympathize with her solely due to her thirst for vengeance." "But what happened?" I asked. "Alazuna was a good maiden, extremely beautiful and responsible, until her father died and she was forced to accept someone as a husband. She did, of course, and he loved her too. Soon she was expecting a baby, but fate was cruel, playing games on her. Her husband was killed on his way to this village after he was intercepted by thieves, while Alazuna sat waiting for him to appear. He never did. Soon she began to hate the look of her baby daughter, since she resembled her dead husband so much. On multiple occasions, in a fit of grief if you want to call it, she tried to strangle her baby too. The villagers noticed this and chided her. Unable to bear the talk of the town, she hung herself in the trees of the forest outside the fields, in her wedding clothes. She claimed that once the last breath had left her, her husband would come and embrace her again. It was a tragedy that has haunted this town for quite a while. Before her last breath, she bitterly made a vow, scribbling it on a piece of paper. She promised to curse all those who came from her daughter with the very same pain she experienced. Ever since she had died, her soul has been unable to move on, haunting the village. "What curse, Grandma?" I asked, a worrying lump growing in my throat. "The curse of loneliness," my grandma responded as the goosebumps stood up on my arm. "The curse is that you may find true love, only to be lost or taken away from you forever. It is because Alizuna cannot bear to see the women of her daughter prosper, unlike her." "But why me?" My grandma looked down, her face forlorn. "I was the daughter she tried to kill, and you are from me. She senses your presence in the village." I stood up in shock, my hand reaching to my neck where the laceration had been taped up by my uncle to the best of his power. It throbbed tenderly, sending waves of pain throughout my body. "Why not my cousins, then?" I finally asked. "Because you are new here. Your energy does not match the locals. The only part of it which does is the part of your soul, which is from me. To her, you are an abomination." I stayed quiet, trying to absorb all the horrifying information that had been revealed to me. My grandma sensed my discomfort and spoke. "You know, she has tried to kill me on a few occasions, too. I have always defended myself. But you are a guest here. That is why she acted fast and so lethally. She knows you will leave soon." My grandma saw me, her eyes welling up. "There is only so much we can run, dear." I looked away from her, my eyes welling up, unclear of what the future held for me. I begged my parents to leave the very next day, since nothing seemed the same anymore. The leaves of the trees moved too differently. The villagers looked at me too strangely. I wondered if Alizuna was disguised as one of them. Since I've left, everything has been back to normal. Well, mostly. There are still nights where I wake up in a cold sweat, feeling that something is gripping my leg. There are still nights where I look towards the window during thunder and rain, to see the glimpse of a veiled bride in black looking back at me. Hey friends, thanks for listening. Look forward, subscribe, and click on the notification bell for more future stories. Peace.